Hi there, this is the Guitar Speak podcast, episode number 5. My name's Matt Wakeling, thank you for joining me. Now in today's episode we interview Brett Kingman, a real mainstay of the Australian guitar scene, and more recently he's built an amazing career as a gear reviewer on YouTube where literally thousands of people every single day are checking out his videos. It's quite amazing, so that interview is coming up very soon. First, I've got a little bit of news. Our home for our podcasts now is guitarspeakpodcast.libsyn.com. Libsyn, L-I-B-S-Y-N, guitarspeakpodcast.libsyn.com. You can find all our episodes there, all our previous episodes and ones to come. Of course, we're still on iTunes, we're still on Stitcher, we're still on the Facebook, we're still on the Instagram, so you can find us in all the regular kind of places. Speaking of Instagram, I met Mick Marcelino. Shout out to Mick Marcelino from the Amps and Axes podcast. Mick said hello to me via Instagram, which I really appreciate. I've enjoyed that podcast for ages. He co-hosts Amps and Axes with Jeff Bober over in Maryland in the USA. It's a really great podcast, and in our online conversation, Mick ended up giving me a bit of technical help when I quite needed it. So I appreciate that. Thanks, Mick. Appreciate it, mate, and love your show. Now, we've launched our jam with our backing track, Get On Our Podcast campaign. The track you're hearing now is available for free download, and we want you to solo over it and send it to us, and we'd love to play it on the show. There's details for that on our Libsyn page, guitarspeakpodcast.libsyn.com, or just probably go to Facebook and follow the links there. That's the easiest way to do that. But we would love to hear you playing and see what you put over this track. Now, onto our interview with Brett Kingman. For the best part of the last 30 years, Brett Kingman has been the guitar mainstay in James Reyne's solo band. Now, James Reyne, of course, was the frontman of Australian Crawl, had a great career with them, and has had an incredibly long and prosperous career as a solo artist since the mid-80s. And without a doubt, James would be one of the most iconic voices and songwriters in Australian rock history. Brett tells us about that gig and many of the other big names in Australia who he has worked with. Brett also talked to us about his YouTube channel where he reviews guitar gear. Now, to say this channel has taken off would be a gross understatement. We're talking over 20 million views in 8 years checking out his stuff, and gear manufacturers, some really very big names, are throwing stuff at Brett for him to review on that channel. So we'll find out how he put that together too. Anyway, time for our interview. Brett Kingman, welcome to the Guitar Speak podcast.
My great pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Hey, you've just come off tour with James Reyne. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Sure. We've been on a number of tours for the last, nearly 3 years. We've been supporting Chris Isaac. That was the last tour that we just finished, and before that we were on a sort of a greatest hits run. Mm-hmm. And we did an Australian Crawl greatest hits run. James Reyne plays Australian Crawl, and before that we were out on the road with Rod Stewart. And before that we've been on an 8-year tour, so it's been a never-ending tour in terms of being at the airport pretty much every Thursday or Friday morning for the last 2 or 3 years, and I'm kind of glad that it is over for the next few months at least.
Yeah, sure.
Not because I don't like playing with James, but because I'm happy to be here on weekends with my wife and daughter, who are getting a little shirty, and understandably.
Sure.
Yeah.
Good to hear. So you're doing some supports and headlines and festivals and things then, by the sounds of things.
Yeah, lots of headlines and support to Rod Stewart. Sure. And a sort of a co-headline with Chris over the last 3 or 4 weeks. So it's been interesting playing humongous venues and then some modest pubs as well, which I prefer actually because people are right in your face.
Yeah, cool. I might just back up. What got you started playing guitar in the first place, Brett?
There's an interesting question. I think it was actually walking into a friend's older brother's bedroom in 1971 when I was probably not much older than 8. Well, I wouldn't have been older than 8 in 1971. And hearing Slade Alive, which was a live album that Slade, the glam band from the early 70s, put out. Very heavy album. And the power that was coming through those speakers just transformed me into something like an Exocet missile. So I thought, that's it. I'm going to be a guitar player. From that moment on,
Okay. Awesome.
I was programmed to be a guitar player. And so I ran around school pretending I could be a guitar player until I actually got an acoustic guitar, which was a $20 Suzuki, and then I was obsessed with learning how to play the thing. And I had some formal lessons for about a year and a half when I was 9, 10 years old from a elderly lady who unfortunately passed away after that period of time. So, but I'd elevated quite quickly through classes and even at that young age. So I just continued on my own journey after that and taught myself and spent maybe 6 hours every day until I was 17 or thereabouts, at least 6 hours every day practicing.
Wow. And who were you listening to around then? So after Slade,
well,
what was the other big
we're
thing?
talking about 72, 73 onwards through to 1982. So it was the concurrent releases at that time, and pretty much every classic rock album between 72 and 1980 is still acknowledged as the best period of, or the golden age of classic rock. So that's what I grew up on. And so it was, initially it was David Bowie and it was Slade and it was T-Rex, the kind of the English guitar-driven pop glam stuff, I suppose, and then it graduated rather to Zeppelin. I remember when John Bonham died, I wore a black armband to school.
Okay.
Sabbath, all of the Yes, who were challenging, still are, in terms of technical prowess, from Steve Howe and trying to learn his stuff. And I still listen to those bands. So that's who it was. And then 77 rolled in and I was a skateboarder, and Devo and the Sex Pistols and those sorts of bands were in vogue with that community. So I went off on a sort of a punk tangent for a little bit, but it was not challenging enough in terms of I could play that stuff easily. Mm-hmm. So I then went back into sort of tougher stuff to play. Frank Zappa, Van Halen appeared, Metallica appeared early on in the 80s. Yeah, all the usual suspects. Hendrix and Clapton never got a look in, and rarely do today. I have hardly any of I don't have any Clapton records on any medium. I think I've got his Robert Johnson homage somewhere. And Hendrix, I'm only kind of dipping my toes into now.
Okay. So I've read you were doing gigs when you were 12. What sort of gigs does a 12-year-old pull in Victoria?
Well, 12-year-old doesn't really pull many gigs at all. We're talking about Victoria in the 1970s. No internet, no mobile phones, a couple of television stations. I was playing with the local sort of square dance band that had a family at my school, and they were called the Chubbies. And so I was invited to come and play along with the Chubbies.
Nice.
And I'd sent a cheerio to my still friend Dick Custerson, who was the drummer at the time, and and then after that I was involved in every school band that I could talk my way into. Most of them were hosted by kids that were considerably older than me, and so we used to jam Zeppelin and Sabbath day in and day out.
Cool, awesome.
Yeah.
And
play parties and stuff.
Yeah, right. So when did you move into professional playing?
Shivers me timbers. I think that would have been, if we're talking sort of national level professional playing, I was always paid to play guitar at churches and stuff like that. I'm now a very much lapsed Catholic, but in the early 70s I didn't have much of a choice, so I was playing weddings and funerals, and they used to pay.
Okay.
Funnily enough. And then, but on a rock and roll level, I had a little band here in Melbourne I was part of a little band called The Adventure, who were the first sort of indie band to appear on Countdown without a record deal. And then after that I was recruited into the Uncanny X-Men when Ronnie was had domestic restrictions put on him. He wasn't allowed to tour for a couple of years. So I was brought in at a pretty young age and to finish off the album and then go on tour with them.
Cool. So this is like early 80s, I guess, when they were
That
hitting?
was about 85, 86.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Cool.
And I stayed with them for nearly a year. But I had to leave them in the lurch, which I didn't want to do but I had to because I'd met James Reyne at a nightclub and he'd just come back from LA having finished his first solo album sessions and broken up and split up Australian Crawl not long before that and said, I hear you play pretty good guitar, do you want to join my band? So, of course, I said yes. And the next morning I was part of his band and had to give the news to the X-Men, who were not very happy. So... understandably, but fortunately my brother Scott stepped in. He was very young at the time, but he did it, and the tour continued. Everybody was reasonably happy.
Cool.
Me.
Awesome. So early James Reyne, I'm thinking tracks like Hammerhead. I used to love that. I was probably I was born in 71, so by the time Hammerhead came out, I was sort of getting into playing and a little, so that was a fun track.
Yep, Hammerhead, Fall of Rome, Rip It Up. That first album had a lot of great songs on it.
Yeah.
And we're actually toying with the idea of touring it because it'll be its 30th anniversary, believe it or not, next year.
Wow, awesome.
That's how long I've been involved with James and his family, who I'm now married to his sister Elizabeth.
Ah, okay.
And I'm talking to you from the kitchen in which the Reyne family grew up in. We ended up buying the family home.
There you go.
Yes. So the Kingmans and the Reynes are now ensconcebly, what's the word I'm looking for? Intertwined.
Yeah. So you've got to play for him now.
Well, I don't have to, and I've refused the current tour that he's about to, or politely declined, I should say, the current tour that he's about to embark on with Mark Seymour.
Oh, okay.
Yep, we're going out to do a national run together in an acoustic configuration, and Josh Owen, who is now playing the other guitar, we both share lead and rhythm duties in the band, is a Melbourne-based player, phenomenally talented, very classy and a lovely bloke. He will be going out to do that run with James, so that will be something special for people who go to those gigs because he will bring an entirely new palette of approach to it, and it'll be great. And I will rejoin them when the summer festivals start in late October.
Okay, cool. So just backing up then, after you joined James's band, you still seem to be pulling a lot of sideman sort of gigs. You became quite well known as a sideman to choose for touring and records.
Yeah, I became a bit of a hired gun, which was nice. So I ended up in Daryl Braithwaite's touring act for a while because he'd just released The Edge, and it was recorded by all of the same personnel pretty much that did James's early work, and written by Simon Hussey, who co-wrote a lot of those tunes. And James's first album. Anyway, so I ended up in Daryl's band. Then I ended up in Vicar and Linda's band. I was in Deborah Byrne's band for a while. I was a hired gun for a producer here called Mark Forrester, so I played a lot on Peter Andre stuff and Shantuzzi stuff.
Yeah.
And
that's another Reyne, isn't it? Didn't David Reyne play
the
Shantuzzis
for a couple of years? Yep, that's right.
There you go.
And then I did Hair, the musical, for 8 months or something, as just a guitar player in the pit.
Okay.
And then sorry.
Oh, are you a good reader? Is that how you got? Is that
Shocking reader, which was unfortunate because I had to learn 43 pieces of music inside 2 weeks. I don't know why I said yes to that gig.
Yeah.
I think just nothing was happening for a couple of months, so I just said okay.
Sure.
So that was very challenging, but I did learn it, and to their satisfaction apparently, and we had a lot of fun until I got sick of doing 8 shows a week and had to pull out for boredom and health reasons. It was driving me completely mental, so I stopped that. And then I was in a band called Bigger Than Jesus in Melbourne for a while, which was fronted by Steve Lucas from X, and it was very heavy thrash band.
Mm-hmm.
Lot of fun. But we were insane party animals, and it was getting to be dangerous. So I left that and ended up back on the road with James after he came back from the Rio tour, the first one. Brad Robinson talked me back into the band.
Great.
And I haven't really been off since, but I still do a lot of corporate work with people like Joe Camilleri and Ross Wilson and a lot of the heritage acts. So I know all of those guys pretty well, and I've had a lot of fun with them on boats, cruise ships, and corporate tours, and the Apia tour, and those sorts of things.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, these guys could hire anyone. What do you think it takes to be a really good sideman and just to keep working as you have?
Well, the first thing that I know that I look for in the band, and James looks for, because we're really the only constant members in his band apart from Johnny Watson, the drummer, is personality. If you can't get on with somebody, or there's something that irks you about them, regardless of their talent, you're a fool if you go any further in terms of saying, yeah, come on tour, because you'll drive each other mental. And that has happened in the past where, you just don't even want to get in the same car as a person, let alone sit next to them on a plane or something like that. Unfortunately, not too often. So you've got to be very careful about amicability. And I think that I try to be tolerable to most people, and that's what's got me through. And after that, it's your ability to cut the gig, of course. Yep. So, first and foremost is your ability to be social, and then you've got to be able to cut it. Of course, if you can't cut it, well then, you're not going to get the job either. So I've been able to adapt myself to all of the styles so far required by all of the above aforementioned, which hasn't been hard because they're all pretty classic rock and or pop. And I grew up on the Stones and Keith Richards and Nile Rodgers later on after all those other acts that we spoke about later. So and when I actually study a style, let's say funk, Nile Rodgers, I will absolutely throw myself into Nile's head for 3-4 months until I've nailed it. Not just from a technical level, but from the objective approach level as well, the psychological level of how to approach that style. So that's helped me a lot, I think, in terms of being able to play various styles. I can even bluff my way through jazz if I have to. Pretty loosely though.
Sure. We've all bluffed our way through some jazz. I've got a genre I call wedding jazz. It means I can play moon dance in any key you want. Yeah. But I need a chart for all the things you are.
Yeah, and even if I had a chart thrown in front of me with all the diminished and 11s and 13s and all that stuff, see, I don't know anything about that stuff.
Sure.
So I have to play by ear, which is fortunate because I can play by ear. That's how I pretty much learned to play, with sitting in front of the television and playing with anything that came along, or the radio, and not restricting myself to, I'm not going to play that. That's that's in 3/4. It sounds wussy. I'm everything, and that's what I teach students today, is to not to restrict yourself.
Cool.
Anything but.
When you've got a gig or tour coming up, do you? I want to talk about your gear review channel in a little bit, but you seem like you've got a bit of a collection of stuff.
Yeah.
Do you have a go-to rig, or do you tailor it depending on the artist in terms of gear, guitars, amps, pedals?
Well, nowadays I use Fractal Audio stuff on stage pretty much exclusively.
Okay, yeah.
I even have an affiliation with Fractal Audio. I'm a beta tester for them now. I do video demos for them. But the reason I got in bed with them in the first place was because I've always favoured cutting-edge technology, always, not just musical but computer-wise as well.
Okay.
Always had an interest in it, and always tried to exploit the most that I possibly can out of whatever the medium is. So the Axe FX was really, for me, an extension of things like Digitex 2101 that appeared in the 80s.
Yeah. That had the tube built in. It was
That's right.
a couple of units high.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool.
All that stuff I've mucked around with and used with abandonment on stage at one point or another. So the XFX for me was the pinnacle of that sort of technology. So I just bought one.
Yeah, awesome.
And I haven't looked back since. And that was 3 or 4 years ago, I think.
Awesome.
Now I have all of their products, and it's pretty much all I use on stage. The front of house guys, be it at a pub or an arena with 25,000 people in it, will not let me use an amp or anything else because it just sounds so great. Yeah. And they're getting gorgeous stereo feeds with no spill. I can dial up any amp or cabinet I want from, a couple of 100 different sorts, as well as the effects.
Yep.
The controller board sits in front of me. It's connected by one XLR cable, so I don't even need to feed it power. It's just ace. And I've got 2 wedges in front of me blasting 500 watts each in stereo at my face. That's just, people say they miss their cabs. You should try that.
That's cool. So, I was going to ask about cabs. So with the James Reyne tour, is that are you using in-ear foldback for that, or you just got the blasting wedges?
Wedges in front of me.
Okay.
If they're huge stages like one of the big outdoor shows or one of the big arenas like Rod Laver down here in Melbourne, I'll have satellite wedges planted on the sides of the stage as well, because I use a wireless so I can run around and make it look a bit animated.
Yeah.
And the problem with wedges is as soon as you step 4 or 5 feet away from them on either side, they're fairly directional and you lose it. So I've got to have satellites planted around, which is great. I love that, and the other guys don't mind it either. So it works out fine. In-ears I've never toyed with and won't until they work out some sort of spatial dimension algorithm that allows you to kind of feel where you are, because at the moment it's two-dimensional,
yes,
one-dimensional almost. You can't get away from it. You can't get a feeling of space.
Yes.
To a great degree. So, no, I haven't gone down the in-ear path yet.
Okay, cool. With the X, I've talked to a few guys who are using it. Peter Northcott up here in Sydney, Michael Dolce up here.
Yep. We all collaborate.
Yeah, cool. That's awesome. The you would know probably more than most, like the history of modelling. The early modelers, even if they sounded kind of good, I used to have one of those kidney bean pods, and some of the sounds were usable, but it never felt really great. Do you reckon XFX has covered that bridge?
Oh, definitely. Mm-hmm. I do, yes.
Yeah, cool.
The Johnson J station was a great one from that period.
Okay.
Do you remember that?
Yeah. The desktop sort of thing, hey? And they're not doing amps and things.
And appeared at about the same time, or not long after, maybe a month after the first Line 6 pod came out. So there was obvious comparisons. I preferred the J station. Just the sounds were a bit more organic and better. And even it still stands it still stands up today, I reckon. But to answer your question, the XFX, which is really the only recent one that I'm familiar with, Line 6 haven't availed me a Helix yet, and Kemper will probably never let me try one of their gigs because they know that I'm associated with Fractal Audio. So that's okay, and that's understandable. Although disappointed, because I would like to try them at some point. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people want an XFX to do exactly what an amp does. I want it to sound like a 1959 Super Lead Plexi, and I want to feel that sound level pressure from an early basket weave TV quad box. I don't do that. I use it like if I wanted that, I'd get one on stage. So I actually use it for what it is capable of, and cut all of those kind of fence barriers, and not to be too particular about making it emulate something else, although they're great starting blocks.
Sure.
But, I might like something like a Carolan triptych amp through a 1x12 cabinet, or modelled, of course, just on a in front of 20,000 people, just because the sound is focused more. So, yeah, I've never been fussed about the absolute accuracy of the modelling, but it is a good starting block. Yeah, sure. I'm one of the outside square thinkers, I think. So others want that. Well, it doesn't sound like the 65 twin to me. Well, get a 65 twin, man. So that's my only answer.
Yeah, cool.
And even Cliff, the guy, and the guys who program at Fractal Audio will say, these are if you want the real thing, use the real thing, because this is so much more. And they're quite right. It is so much more.
Yeah, cool.
The potential is vast. For enjoyment, relaxation, I'll go and turn the thing on and just pick an amp that I've never tried before. So some crazy exotic thing that Cliff has modelled, and maybe one of his own Dumbles. He owns a couple apparently, and just muck around with it for a while and see what I can do with it. So it's the gift that keeps on giving for me.
Cool. One video I loved on your site, you had, I can't remember what the patch, I can't remember anything about it other than like you're working your guitar volume like you would with any other amp, and the touch and response to my ear. Obviously playing it you're going to feel it differently, but to my ear it sounds like, okay, I can hear you digging in, I can hear you backing off on the guitar.
Yeah.
And that stuff modelling hasn't always done very well, I guess.
No, well, Cliff takes great pains to make sure that kind of dynamic is included in the algorithm, which wouldn't be easy, I don't think. And you're quite right. I am a big fan of the pinky on the volume knob. I've never used the volume pedal ever. And it does exactly what I could do when I was running Marshalls or Fender backline or whatever. So it's a mix. It's a great mixture of old and new.
Cool.
With all of those cool dynamics that you've just, a great example that you've just pointed out.
Sure, cool. What about guitars? What are you playing? Is that per gig basis or?
I have. It is. I try to think like that, but inevitably I always come back to a bloody Stratocaster. Always. So I've probably got 40 or 50 guitars, and that range from crappy down electros through to 8-string extended Ibanez, Prestige, and ESP things. Telecasters are fabulous. I've got a couple of Gibsons, but always it must be just, I don't know why, habit or something, but usually it ends up being the old Fiesta Red 56 Strat custom shop thing that I run around with.
Great.
Just probably the simplest instrument in the entire menagerie. Menagerie, what's the word? And it just feels, it's just comfortable and does everything I need it to do.
Yeah,
but
cool.
What I do habitually and frustratingly, I think, even for myself, is continuously change pickups. I'm working with 3 or 4 different pickup manufacturers at the moment, including Chris Kingman, who's given me about 30 different sets. So I'm always swapping them in and out and checking out. That's kind of fun too.
Cool. So what pickups have you got in there at the moment?
At the moment, I've got a set of 4 Seasons bluesy sort of Strat pickups, and 4 Seasons are from, gosh, I better get this right, the Netherlands, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
And they're just Alnico 4 and 5 standard moderate output Strat pickups, but they sound gorgeous. But normally it would be Mick Brealey's pickups. I've got a lot of guitars with his stuff in it. And next week it may be Mick Brealey's pickups again.
Sure.
But at the moment, they're these 4 Seasons pickups, which are great. And I've got a couple of custom Strats built for me by a fellow down here called Rob Butenhouse, another Dutchman.
Yep.
And it's a wood grain thing that you might have seen on a couple of the videos or even on stage, and it runs Chris Kingman's new pickups.
Okay. Are they the noiseless?
Zero hum, we call them, because the noiseless tag was appropriated or licensed at least by Fender.
Yeah.
And so Chris he calls them zero hum, but yes, the description would be there ain't no noise.
Wow.
Not even the Jazzmaster pickups, which are amazing. I've got a couple of, 6 Jazzmasters here. I reckon I've torn out all the pickups in them and put Chris Kingman's pickups in that, which sound better and no noise. Which is unusual for a Jazzmaster because they're usually hummy bastards.
Yeah. They have that funny, I don't know how to describe, the extra metal hanging out the sides that... Yeah,
well, they're big, flat, single coil pickups for it, really.
Yeah.
And so there's this magnetic field just going everywhere, and unless you shield it incredibly well, or use something like Chris's pickups, you've got to live with that noise, which can be an additive to your music as well, just look at Sonic Youth or Jay Mascis or, those sorts of people who will actually ride that noise. But, so I've kept one or two Japanese jazz masters with the original American pickups I put in them, and they've got the noise, and they're nice. But, yeah, Chris's stuff's pretty good.
Cool. I think with the Fender, do you know the story? I think he was working with Fender at one stage, or they were in discussion about using his designs.
Yeah, I know that there was some sort of potential collaboration.
Okay.
That in the end, for one reason or another, didn't happen, and I don't know what those reasons are, and I've never probed Chris about it, who doesn't live in Australia anymore, by the way. I think he's in the Philippines now, and I've never. I've only known him really professionally for maybe a year or so, although we've admired each other from afar, which is flattering, for me at least. I knew there was some upset, and I don't want to even speculate on what that might have been.
Sure.
So I don't know the details or the facts, but it never eventuated, suffice to say, and he's still out on his own and doing quite well.
Yeah. Cool. Hey, Brett, can we talk about your YouTube channel? Now,
Yep.
I've got some numbers. I don't know if they're correct. You've been doing it for about 8 years or so?
Yep, started it as a sort of a backroom bit of fun in 2008. Mm-hmm. And by 2010, I'd been headhunted by a pro guitar shop, and it was a business concern. It became a business concern inside 2 years. So it was a tenacious, persistent effort to sort of make some sort of impact, be it good or bad, and in the end it's worked out to be quite good.
Yeah. When you say quite good, I've heard somewhere between 12 and 16 million views. Is that right?
Well, it's actually more than that. It's about 22 million.
Oh, you're joking.
Yeah.
That is crazy.
That's on my channel, and then there's, on the Pro Guitar Shop channel, I don't even know. It would be probably the same again for my videos, because I know that they're up to about 200 mil.
Wow. So on any given day, like right now, there'll be people around the world, like there'll be thousands of people a day checking out your videos, checking out gear stuff.
300,000 hits a month I get.
Wow. That'll do it.
Give or take 5%. I watched the trends of, but it wasn't always like that, of course. When I first hit 500 views, I couldn't believe it. Mm-hmm. And then 6 months later, it was 50,000. I thought, wow, this is actually. I might start soliciting for pedals from manufacturers, but I didn't have to because they started coming to me. Mm-hmm. I've got 100 pedals sitting outside there at the moment, and maybe a dozen amps from various manufacturers, including Roland and Blackstar, big ones. Yeah. And any guitars coming in here? There are a few guitars coming in, but just piles and piles of stuff. Earthquaker Devices sent me 8 pedals yesterday, and it takes a full day, unfortunately, to make a video, set it up, research the product, film it, edit it, master it. I was going to say upload it, but that 2-hour thing finished yesterday because now I've got the NBN.
Very good.
And get it online.
Thank you, Malcolm.
It's actually, but in terms of a working day, it's usually about 6 to 8 hours for any given product.
Okay. Wow, that's huge. And you do all that yourself in-house?
Yeah, well, I've got to, because there's no one else around here to do it. The skill set, and I say this in all humility, is very high. You've got to be right on top of Pro Tools. You've got to be right on top of Final Cut Pro. Know how to place microphones and cameras, and then have the. You've got to be able to present it. You've got to be able to make those pedals sound great with a particular style approach, and then be able to frame the picture. And you with me? So it's actually. You are very much a one-man show for all of those skills that are required, and it's expensive because we're talking about Canon cameras with $2,000 lenses, 3 Macs with the gruntiest CPUs in them. I could afford to do the crunching, the rendering. Mm-hmm. then there's the amount of money and time invested in when the channel first started, because I wasn't being given pedals or anything, and still nothing's for free because you work for it. People don't understand it. Oh, he gets all these pedals for free. Well, I don't get them for free at all, because every time something comes through the door, it's work. It's another day's work.
Yeah.
So consequently, I now charge for it accordingly, which is why it's become a business and why I've got to sit here for the next 6 months and try and catch up with all the work.
That's cool. Some people would find that a fun problem. Hey, anyone with a smartphone can start a gear review channel, or dare I say it, a podcast.
Many do.
Yes. How come? What do you think? I think maybe you've answered this, but why do you think yours has taken off?
Well, I got in relatively early when there weren't too many people doing it. The only ones that were established of any note that I knew about were Gearman Dude, who I'm now friendly with.
Okay.
And
is he the guy that sounds like Jack Black?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. He's actually a really friendly guy whose name I won't disclose.
Okay.
Works in a guitar store down in Southern America, and loves playing the Rolling Stones, but does sound a lot like Jack Black and has the same kind of wry humour. So he's been pigeonholed, and I think he plays on that, as you know.
Yeah.
Right. So there was him, and there was Andy, and Pro Guitar Shop had only just begun really, and at that point in time as well. So they were the benchmarks for me, and there weren't much other competition, and I'd always try to approach it with a degree of humour and objectively, in that I wanted to see on my videos at least what I would want to see if I was another person watching them. Mm-hmm. So it's not about me, it's about the product. So shut up, Brett, and just get on with demonstrating the product, but try to give you as accurate representation as possible, so the guy in the Arizona desert who can't get to a music shop because the nearest one is 250 miles away can actually have faith in the pedal that he orders online, because Kingman has made it sound like this. So that's what I know I'm going to get.
Yeah, sure.
That's what's driven the success of the channel is audio and explanatory accuracy, I think, and so that it can be relied on.
Awesome. Yeah, it looks like fairly early on you must have made a conscious decision to. I mean, the quality was always good, but you started miking up your amps.
The quality was not always. The quality was originally it was put the pedal here in front of the MacBook Pro, which is what I'm talking to you now, and just using the mic and the camera on it, because I had nothing else. Sure. And then I borrowed a little Sony video cam from somebody who never got it back for 2 years, and then I got a decent microphone, and I stopped using GarageBand, and I stopped using iMovie, and I started using Pro Tools, and I started using Final Cut Pro, and I got bloody serious about it, and bought a Mac Pro, and then bought a Canon, SLR camera that could shoot HD with a $2,000 lens, and I had to invest time and effort into it, and be tenacious about making it better every single time. And I still try to do that, although I know I do some pretty loose stuff. If I had a couple of whiskeys, I'll just turn the camera on and go for it, which is fun too. And funnily enough, they're pretty popular, those videos. But I always try to keep improving in some way or other. You know what the crazy thing is? Here's a mad story. I am a bass player, man, but the most popular videos on my channel by far are the bass videos. Really? Really. Wow. Have a look at the stats. You can bring it up if you want. We're talking, 400,000 views for some of that Tech 21 bass stuff. It's nutty. So either there's no bass players out there doing great videos channels, or they've just started, I hope so, or I can't explain it. Yeah. Just a little tidbit.
So there's an opportunity for someone out there.
Oh, much, yeah. Because I'm not much good at it. Well, I didn't think so. No.
So apart from 100 odd pedals to review and some more touring when the weather warms up, have you got anything else sort of planned for the rest of this year, or has that tied you down for now?
I had a contract with MGM/Waterfront for 3 solo albums.
Okay, great.
Based on the ambient sort of stuff that I do when I'm mucking around out there, which people seem to love for some reason. I'm very grateful. That's all they want. So I'm going to try to at least, and I'm 3 years behind with the first one.
Yeah.
But I've got all the Pro Tools sessions from all of the videos that I've done, and we're talking 1,500 videos. So there's a lot of material to sift through. And a friend and I are going to go through it and hopefully get at least the first one out this year.
So when you say going through videos, you mean you're going to...
Go through the Pro Tools sessions to look for... All the videos I do are 99% improvised compositions.
Okay, yeah.
To suit whatever I'm demonstrating. Rather than... Occasionally I will learn, a Zakk Wylde solo or something like that. Pro Guitar Shop usually want you to play something that the viewer can reference.
Okay, sure.
So I do that, but really, I'm too lazy. I just can't do it, and I'm good at improvising, so I just make stuff up. So in the course of making all of this stuff up, there's usually some sort of melody involved because that's the kind of musical background I came from, and I find it easy to do. So there's some pretty good stuff in there that is worthy of some post-production and just, throwing out as a 2 or 3 minute piece, a bit like the Aphex Twin would have done, with his electronic stuff. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, right, cool.
So it'll be a niche audience at best, listening audience. It's not something I'd want to tour. But the contract's there. They're waiting for the material, I think, still. And I'd like to do it just for fun. So cool. That's a side project. But the most important thing for me at the moment is to plough through all of this work that's been sitting there, some of it for longer than 18 months.
Cool. Well, Brett, man, thank you so much. You've given us a lot of time, and you've obviously, as you said, you've got a billion pedals out the back. You need to start plugging in eventually. So thank you so much for joining us. It's been
my great pleasure.
Awesome.
Thank you for having me.
Cool. And what's the best way for people to keep up to date with the stuff you're up to?
Well, my Facebook page is usually my point of communication, first point of communication, followed by YouTube, and you can subscribe to that channel quite easily. It's just one click.
Yep.
So if all they want to see or hear is YouTube demos, that's probably their best point of reference. If they want to see and hear or talk about other gear that may not be demoed, but that I'm discussing with my Facebook page rather, is a frequent point of communication for not just myself but all the people I know.
Yep.
And which is mainly industry people, so it's kind of interesting. Yeah, that's. And I have a website which I've criminally disregarded for the last year or so, just because I haven't had the bloody time to maintain it. But hello, Paul Hanna in Sydney, who put it up for me. Very clever designer, and I'd like to say that it would be a good point of a good one-stop shop, but at the moment I'm sorry that it's not. So YouTube or Facebook.
Cool. All right. Awesome. Well, I'll keep an eye out. We'll keep an eye out for some more gear reviews and those 3 solo ambient albums. Looking forward to that.
Yeah, they're a bit of fun, and then I'll be back on the stage with James and the rest of the crew in late October for, I think we're doing the Red Hot Summer Tour, but don't make me stick to that. One of the big outdoor runs, probably a couple of days on the greens, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, right. Cool. All right, mate. Thanks, Brett. We'll talk to you soon then.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks for having me, and see you later.
Cheers. All right, well, that was my conversation with Brett Kingman. I really enjoyed talking to Brett. Really good guy, and he's had an amazing career, and it just keeps going from strength to strength. If you haven't checked out his YouTube channel, and really there can't be many people left who haven't, but if you haven't seen that, definitely check it out. It's an excellent place for gear enthusiasts. All right, we're just about out of here. Just a couple of reminders. You can find us now on guitarspeakpodcast.com. guitarist.libsyn.com. We're still on iTunes, we're still on Stitcher. You can come and see us on Facebook. You can see us on Instagram. You can email us at guitarspeakpodcast.com. All right, well, thanks for joining us. I really appreciate you listening in. I appreciate you sharing the episodes around. And it's great to hear people are enjoying the interviews and things we're doing here. So really, thank you very, very much. All right, you've been listening to the Guitar Speak podcast. My name's Matt Wakeling. See you next time.